Who are the best fantasy football waiver wire pickups of the last decade? That is our topic here in the Fantasy Football Survival Kit. I enjoy these decade lookbacks because I get to remember the times that I made some smart moves when I actually picked nice, great pieces up off the waiver wire. This past year, 2019, it sucked. There was nothing good out there. So I like to remember the times when star running backs just came out of nowhere to emerge. And it's great to celebrate your victories because that is what this segment is all about. You, the people. I've talked enough. Let's get right into it. This first one comes in from This first one comes in from @Days of the Castle, and it's Odell Beckham, his rookie season in 2014 when he made that gorgeous one-handed catch. You know, people forget, before he was like the most popular player in the league or whatever, he was a guy that didn't even play in training camp. He didn't even start off the year on the active roster. He was a rookie wide receiver. He broke all the rules about rookie wide receivers that don't play in training camp, went on to score double-digit touchdowns, was a total monster that year. If you picked him up off the waiver wire, which, by the way, you're welcome. Go check the archives. I told you to do that. You probably won your damn fantasy league that year. Next. This next one comes in from @SportsJazzFan, and it's Alvin Kamara, hands down. Yes, I recall the days of old in his rookie season when people were debating, well, do I take Mark Ingram, Adrian Peterson? Yeah, there's that rookie, but he was drafted in the 3rd round. Who cares? Well, you should probably care because Alvin Kamara became this ultra productive pass catcher, this great double-digit touchdown threat, and Adrian Peterson was dust. He was traded away to the Cardinals. No one cared. He was the clear wrong answer. Kamara became a league winner off the waiver wire when people just left him sitting there. And it just goes to show you that sometimes new is always better, but only sometimes. I don't want to get hit with an ageism lawsuit. Next. This next one comes in from @ancient_mariner, Alfred Morris, and this brought a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling to my heart. I remember in 2012 when everybody doubted Mike Shanahan when he said, hey, this guy, Alfred Morris, he's running as a starter in preseason. This guy might be our guy. No one wanted to believe it. Oh, wait, he went out and led the NFL in rushing in his rookie season with RG3 by his side in the backfield. What a rookie tandem that was. And God, Washington, that was like 30 regimes ago. Doesn't that feel like 1,000 seasons in our past? Well, it's not. It was actually this decade, and I had to be reminded of that myself when I looked at this picture. Next. This next one comes in from @TheLAWanderer, Victor Cruz, doing that little salsa dance, which I don't really care about that anymore, but I do care about remembering all those years ago when Victor Cruz was flashing as a rookie in preseason wearing number 3. Number 3. People thought that was a joke. Well, guess what? It wasn't a joke. He grew up, he got himself the number 80 jersey, and he became a professional, and he was crushing it for your fantasy football team off the waiver wire. Just a total unknown hero. By the way, what is it with Giants wide receivers like popping up out of nowhere to become these fantasy heroes off the waiver wire? Like, is that a trend to pay attention to? No, it's just random. Don't pay attention to that at all. Next. This next one comes in from @MuhammadAlem7, and it's David Johnson. And look, I know people, David Johnson is not in our good graces right now because 2019 was a pretty, terrible season for him in fantasy football. However, let's be positive. Let's think about 2015 when he burst onto the scene as this hulking running back that also caught passes, and he showed you all that speed when he was returning kicks. People, real life, actual people, thought Chris Johnson was going to hold that job all year. I don't think so, folks. If you were one of the people, like me, that drafted David Johnson, dropped him to the waiver wire, and then watched someone else win your fantasy league with him, you probably puked all over yourself, which I may or may not have done. Next. This next one comes in from @SwimFast7, and it's DeAngelo Williams. DeAngelo Williams, in his second act as a fantasy football hero, as a backup running back for the Steelers, was one of the guys that actually became a real workhorse back behind Le'Veon Bell when he got injured. I mean, people chase handcuffs every single year because they remember what DeAngelo Williams did behind Le'Veon Bell. I mean, that is fantasy football Hall of Fame type if I've ever heard it. I mean, look, I wouldn't go and do that anymore. I would let go of the whole handcuff thing, but sure as hell was it great to have DeAngelo Williams. Next. Pause. Action. This one comes in from @RunItBackTurbo, and yes, Devonta Freeman. Man, the year that he became a fantasy superstar, I remember it so clearly. People thought that he was just a guy. They liked Tevin Coleman better, who was this flashy, fast rookie. Well, actually, Tevin Coleman started off really good that year, had some better games to start the season, was the starter for the Atlanta Falcons. Then he got hurt, and Devonta Freeman came in and didn't just become a great running back in fantasy football, didn't just become an RB1 in fantasy football, became the top scoring back in fantasy that year. I mean, that is exactly what you want out of a waiver wire hit. You literally brag to everybody that you know, people that don't even care about fantasy football. You told them about Devonta Freeman. They're like, I don't know what that is. Who cares? You still had all the bragging rights in the world. If that is not the best waiver wire pickup of the decade, I don't know what is. Next. This next one comes in from @7StarKiller1, and they submit CJ Anderson, who, yes, is probably one of the quintessential examples of a guy who becomes a waiver wire hero and then is super overvalued in fantasy pretty much every year after that. But let's stay positive here. I recall, I think it was the 2013 season when CJ Anderson, he just became the guy for the Denver Broncos in Peyton Manning's offense. And I mean, that's the formula, right? Like, he was just a total nobody. A jag. People weren't all that excited about him, but then he becomes a starting running back in a good offense with a Hall of Fame quarterback. That's the mix that you want for a waiver wire hero running back. Next. And let's stay on that Denver Broncos theme here with @David Allen Jr. submitting Julius Thomas. Yes, for all of you sheep out there who weren't reading all the articles, crunching all the numbers, listening to all the podcasts, and you didn't draft Julius Thomas in the final rounds of your fantasy draft, you saw in week 1 when he scored all the touchdowns on way to Peyton Manning eventually breaking the touchdown record that year, that this guy was going to be something special. In fact, we are all still lusting after this image of Julius Thomas, a breakout tight end that just comes out of nowhere off the waiver wire. We're all so thirsty for that because all the tight ends suck now, but that's never coming back, probably. So just let it live as a good memory and don't let it cloud your present. Next. And this last one comes in from @TrevorLewis444, our own Trevor Lewis. And yes, he brings up the man, the myth, the legend, Peyton Hillis. I mean, yeah, what a random occurrence for Peyton Hillis, a guy who was a fullback, an actual fullback in college, became an all-star running back in fantasy football, became a random league winner. One of the most strangest things that's ever happened. And yes, he even submits the Madden cover, the great legendary cover where he beat out Michael Vick and, then was a nobody for the rest of his career. I mean, how the does this guy get on the cover of Madden? I literally have no idea, but let's stop talking about that. Let's talk about something important. Fantasy football. Fantasy football. That's important. He was a big difference maker in fantasy football, and that's not a laughing matter. It's very serious. So that is going to do it for our decade look back here at the greatest waiver wire pickups in the fantasy football survival kit. My heart is warmed by, actually, you know what? My heart is not all that warm, to be honest, because a lot of these guys, they rose to greatness in this one flashing moment of the past decade. And they became heroes. Alfred Morris, David Johnson. They were these waiver wire heroes, but eventually they fell from grace. All heroes someday must fall, if you think about it. But perhaps, this is one more time for me to look inward and not hate these men for their fall, but remember them for their glory. And I hope you remember some of these great moments of the past decade with these wonderful waiver wire pickups as well. And I also hope that you will join the Facebook group, the Fantasy Football Survival Kit, where we are engaging consistently throughout the off season, not just looking back at the past decade, but looking into the future, talking about who are going to be the breakout players, the sleepers, the values in the 2020 fantasy football season. Frankly, if you're not there, you're missing out and you suck. Next. Not next, segment's over.